I am Kriti Mehta and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Two U.S. National Guard soldiers shot and critically wounded near White House in what the U.S. calls a targeted attack. The suspect in the shooting has been identified as Rahmanullah, who is reportedly an Afghan national. U.S. Attorney Janet Pirro says suspect has been identified as a 29-year-old Afghan man who lives in Washington state with his family. She further stated that the suspect is still in hospital. The United States is identifying its efforts to combat drug trafficking in the Caribbean, with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing plans to expand military deployments in the region. Ukraine says its negotiating team will meet U.S. officials soon, with Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha stating that Kyiv will focus on specific steps in peace proposals. The United States has directed its diplomats to lobby foreign governments against policies that support mass migration. This instruction was ignored, issued through a State Department cable sent last week to dozens of U.S. embassies across Europe, Canada, and Australia. Amid the escalating rift between China and Japan, U.S. President Donald Trump urges Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi to avoid further escalation as per reports. This comes as U.S. aims to keep trade truce with China. A massive fire in a Hong Kong complex apartment has claimed 55 lives and has left nearly 300 missing. The Hong Kong police have arrested 3 company officials. British Finance Minister Rachel Reeves announces more than $34 billion in tax freeze in her budget announcement. This is on the top of the £40 billion she raised last year. As a result, a large hit to growth of living standards is expected. The United States has suspended all let's move on to the top focus story at the hour. Now, U.S. has suspended all immigration requests from Afghan nationals effective immediately. Now, this decision is following a shooting in Washington, D.C. that critically injured 2 West Virginia National Guard members near the White House. UNCIS announced the halt, saying it will review security and vetting protocols before resuming processing. President Trump has called the incident an act of terror and used it to reiterate anti-immigrant messages. Officials say the motive behind the shooting is still unclear, and the administration has offered a review of all refugees admitted during the Biden years. The move marks a significant shift in U.S. immigration policy. Now, senior officials are holding a press conference on the shooting. Let's take a look.
Fallen soldiers, prayer for our law enforcement community, prayer for our National Guardsmen and women, prayer for our brave prosecutors at the Department of Justice and the offices of the D.C. United States Attorney. We must come together as a nation, especially on this Thanksgiving Day, and remember the sacrifices that so many are making around the world and around this country to secure our freedoms under President Trump's brilliant leadership and administration. I'll provide an update on the case as follows. It is an ongoing investigation of terrorism. Make no mistake about it. The FBI is leading out on these federal assault on a federal law enforcement officer investigation on many fronts. We immediately, with our law enforcement partners in the Metropolitan Police Department and the interagency, secured the scene, seized the weapon, sent in our evidence response team immediately to collect evidence, and started doing block by block canvasses. We are looking for and interviewing witnesses. The firearm and other materials have been sent to our Quantico laboratory already yesterday for immediate analysis. That work is ongoing. Partnering with the D.C. United States Attorney's Office, we have also executed multiple search warrants around the country to include the subject's last known residence, which is in the state of Washington. The search warrant was executed on that house last night or early this morning, and it is an ongoing process. All the individuals found in the house have been interviewed, and some interviews remain ongoing. We will not stop until we interview anyone and everyone associated with the subject, the house, and every piece of his life. There's also subject interviews, relations conducted in San Diego, pursuant to our ongoing investigation. So, as the judge noted, this is a coast-to-coast investigation being led right here in Washington, D.C., and this subject definitely did pick the wrong country. And we will rise together as a nation to show the world what we do here. And we are thankful that we have the Attorney General's brave leadership and President Trump's brave leadership and priorities to safeguard our communities. I also spoke to Director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, last night, and Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. There is confirmation now that the subject had a relationship in Afghanistan with partner forces. We are fully investigating that aspect of his background as well, to include any known associates that are either overseas or here in the United States of America. That is what a broad-based international terrorism investigation looks like. We will provide continuous details to the American public while at the same time not jeopardizing the ongoing prosecution to ultimately hold this perpetrator accountable in our courts of law. We will provide as much transparency as possible, but as you can see, the breadth and scope of this investigation will continue. We will continue to hit the streets and hit every town and every house and talk to every witness. The men and women of the FBI and the Metropolitan Police Department and the interagency, to include the Department of Homeland Security, DEA, and ATF, are working tirelessly on this Thanksgiving Day. And I know just by talking to the leaders behind me that instead of going on and being with their families, everyone rogered up and showed up to work today. And none of them want to go home. That's the resolve that we have together as a team to bring to you justice for this heinous act of terrorism here in our nation's capital. And as the judge said, we will ensure that our law enforcement partners are out there in full force to make sure the world can enjoy our nation's capital. We will not let this heinous act of violence prevent people from visiting our beautiful nation's capital. And we will also continue to highlight any evidence that we can publicly. And as the judge said, this individual is in this country for one reason and one reason alone: because of the disastrous withdrawal from the Biden administration and the failure to vet anyway, in any way, shape, or form, this individual and countless others. And this administration has taken the rightful step to stop any further allowance of people with this similar background into the country, and we're thankful for that. And as I said, this investigation remains ongoing, and I think I'll turn it over to General Blanchard of the National Guard now. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. All across America this morning, families are waking up. They'll spend the day with their children, their brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, friends from across the community. There will be the smell of turkey, all the fixings. They'll watch parades, football games. They'll pray together. They'll talk about what they're grateful for. This morning, there are two families that will not have that opportunity. Andy and Sarah's families, they're spending the day reflecting on the past, and in the days coming, they'll reflect on and think about what could have been, what might be. Because regardless of the outcome, we know that their lives, their families' lives are all changed forever. Because one person decided to do this horrific and evil thing. And all across America, we are also reminded that there are many law enforcement agents, first responders, soldiers, service members all around the world who at best will come home, eat some cold turkey, open up Tupperware, eat what's left over, because they spent the day defending the American ideals, getting out there and getting after it on every American citizen's behalf. I will say that the District of Columbia National Guard, this task force, is more committed this morning to the President's directive to make D.C. safe and beautiful. Our resolve will be tested. It is being tested, but make no mistake, each and every one of these soldiers and airmen will meet and exceed the expectation that we have for them. They are, in fact, America's best. I'm proud of each and every one of them. I pray for each and every one of them today, and in particular for these two young service members who are willing to go above and beyond and pay whatever price our nation asks of them. I ask every American today to keep them in their thoughts and prayers as you go about your day. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Mayor, where's Mayor Bowser? Yeah.
Thank you, Judge. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and I want to associate myself with the remarks of our Adjutant General from the D.C. National Guard. I want to be very clear what the judge and everyone has reported here. Somebody drove across the country, came to Washington, D.C. to attack America. And that person will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. These young people should be at home in West Virginia with their families.
ATF, anybody? DHS? Anyone? Okay. I also want to say that both Sarah and Andrew, I believe, were sworn in less than 24 hours before they were shot on the street in Washington. Any questions? You know, as the directors indicated, this is a fluid investigation. People are working around the clock. It's too soon to say what the motive is, but there are definitely areas that we're looking into, but not ready to say.
Can you characterize a little bit about how the assailant was taken down after he opened fire?
Yeah, he got shot
But by another guard?
by another guardsman, yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that he had the shooter had initially shot one of the guardsmen, then leaned over as they were
Shot him again. Yep.
How many shots are we?
Well, the specific number. Look, he had a .357 Smith & Wesson revolver. Okay, so I believe that's a six-shooter. Yeah. So, you know, that kind of tells us how many shots he had. Yes.
Judge, you had mentioned we've been here before because we had. It was May when we were last.
Yeah.
I want to ask if you could please comment to, obviously, we understand that you're saying this is under the Biden administration, and the words are that it was a failed withdrawal, and what happened there. There are people who are also upset with the president believing that the national
All right, viewers, and Andrew Latham, who's an international relations expert, now joins us live from Minneapolis. Andrew, welcome to NewsX World once again. Now, we just heard the press conference by the U.S. officials on the shooting of the two National Guards. Now, National Guard troops had become a fixture in D.C., and now two have been shot. And in fact, there are also reports that the suspect was working with the CIA in Afghanistan. Is there any clear motive that is emerging so far behind the shooting?
No, not really. And that comment during the Q&A to that effect that we don't know. Lines of inquiry are being pursued, but we don't know what motivated this. It could have been anything from a mental illness to a political motive. That remains to be seen. The picture will become clearer as we get to know a bit more about his military history, working alongside the American forces, his relations with various people since arriving in the United States. For me, as a political scientist, when I look at this, I see not just the human tragedy, not just the police questions, but the way in which this is politicized immediately. You'll note that President Biden, and by extension all Democrats, are being blamed by the Republicans for letting this guy into the country as the United States withdrew from Afghanistan back in 2021. There are some other political dimensions as well, but as I said, apart from the human tragedy and the police drama, there are these political dimensions to this episode that have caught my eye.
And how do you see the reaction of the U.S. government in that it suspended all Afghan immigration for now?
Well, I think it's, again, a highly politicized reflex, if I can put it that way. What else are they going to do? What they're going to do, of course, is not just pause the migration and the naturalization of certain people, but they're going to review the vetting process and the resettlement process. And what they're going to find, though, is that it's really, really thorough and good, despite what was said during that press conference. This is not an open door, as it were, to people who happen to wear a certain uniform in Afghanistan and allowing them in. No, they get vetted by Americans. They get vetted by partner forces. This is one of the most thorough vetting systems one could imagine. And yet, like any human system, it is liable to break down now and then. And when this fellow was let into the country all those years ago, he may have been not politically motivated, mentally healthy, anchored in his immigrant society, and then something might have happened that sent him over the edge. So that would have nothing to do with the vetting process or with migration. Those sorts of things can happen to anybody, whether they were born in the United States or moved to the United States. So it doesn't surprise me that the U.S. government is having this reflexive pause implemented, but I don't think much will change. Again, the politics are interesting because they don't want to alienate, the Republicans don't want to alienate the American veteran community, which sees those Afghan refugees and asylum seekers in a very positive light. Again, the politics are quite interesting.
Well, absolutely, and we'll be watching out for all those developments. Thank you for sharing your insight with us, but do stay on. Viewers, let's also tell you that the United States is also intensifying its efforts to combat drug trafficking in the Caribbean. Now, with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing plans to expand military deployments in the region. Speaking in the Dominican Republic, Hegseth revealed that the U.S. is seeking to extend its presence by partnering with additional countries to tackle drug cartels and traffickers. The Dominican Republic has already authorized the temporary deployment of the U.S. military assets to support anti-drug operations. Hegseth expressed hope that this model would be adopted by other nations willing to collaborate in the fight against drug-related violence and trafficking. Now, the U.S. has ramped up its military presence in the Caribbean in recent months, carrying out strikes against drug traffickers and smuggling vessels, which have resulted in numerous fatalities. Now, the U.S. aims to disrupt the trafficking networks by deploying more troops, aircraft, and resources, signaling a more aggressive approach to counter the growing threat of drug-related terrorism in the region. And I want to bring back Andrew Latham into the discussion here. Andrew, of course, a very stringent measure in place now to deal with the drug traffickers, especially from the Caribbean. But how will the U.S. administration be able to strike a balance between curbing drug trafficking and drug terrorism and reducing the human toll, the deaths in preventing these drug smuggling operations?
Well, that's really the heart of the issue in one sense. What's the collateral damage going to be? How many? It's one thing when you arrest or interdict or kill an actual drug trafficker. It's another thing if you're killing innocent people by accident. That's going to have, again, political ramifications in the region. It's going to make the United States appear in an even less favorable light than it does now. And it's not just in the Venezuela situation, it's within the Latin American, Caribbean region more broadly. So a very fine line that has to be walked here between using military assets to make a meaningful difference in this campaign against drug trafficking versus the way in which it looks if you're killing innocent civilians, or just the optics of an aggressive American military in the Caribbean. The countries in the region, the people that live there have long memories, and those kinds of American military adventures are not looked at favorably in huge parts of the world. So again, the politics, quite apart from the policing, the politics are really quite interesting, and I hope somebody has their eye on that political ball.
Well, we hope that too, and thanks for joining us for now, Andrew Latham, and sharing your perspective. And viewers, let's move on to news on the Ukraine war. Now, Ukraine is saying that its negotiating team will meet U.S. officials soon, with Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha stating that Kyiv will focus on specific steps in peace proposals. He said Ukraine expects concrete results that could help advance towards a ceasefire. The announcement came as Sybiha spoke alongside Latvia's Foreign Minister Baiba Braze, who said Latvia supports U.S. efforts to achieve peace in Ukraine. This follows comments from a senior Russian diplomat who said Moscow would not make significant concessions on a peace plan. Those remarks came a day after a leaked recording showed a U.S. envoy discussing how Moscow might present its position to President Trump. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier in the week that he is ready to advance the US-backed framework to end the war and to discuss outstanding issues directly with the US president. He said any talks should also include European allies. This is what Ukrainian Foreign Minister had said. Listen in.
Очікувати зустрічі переговорних команд. Які наші очікування? Очікування – конкретні результати для того, щоб відбувався прогрес. Для нас надзвичайно важливо, і Україна неодноразово це демонструвала, досягнення перемир'я. Так, українська сторона зацікавлена у контактах на найвищому рівні, у зустрічі президент Зеленський, президент Трамп, тому що є питання, найбільш чутливі питання, які можуть бути обговорені лише на рівні лідерів.
All right, and let's now welcome Dan Perry, who is a world affairs expert, into the discussion here. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Perry. I just want to ask you now, Kyiv is expecting concrete steps with this meeting with the US official in the coming week. Do you think much progress can be made after this round of discussion, given also that Witkoff is also due to meet the Russian officials in Moscow?
I am skeptical, as I think are most observers, but anything is possible, as has been the case for the past 4 years. It depends on, ultimately, Vladimir Putin and whether he's willing to end the war. The latest, quite disgraceful events suggest otherwise. What we've seen in the past week has been compared to the Munich Agreement that basically forced Czechoslovakia in 1938 to give up part of its territory under the notion that if you appease an aggressive dictator, maybe he will thereafter go away sufficing with his pound of flesh. The 28-point plan that was presented, that became public last week, essentially is emerging as a plan written by the Russians and passed on as an American-Russian plan that would amount to America joining Russia in its effort to weaken Ukraine. I don't see any way that Ukraine and, for that matter, the Europeans can accept a situation where Ukraine not only gives up 20% of its territory, including land Russia hasn't yet occupied in Donetsk and Luhansk, while limiting its armed forces, agreeing that it had conducted a Nazi regime implicitly, and the ban on Nazism that appears there absurdly, agrees to hold elections in 100 days, I believe, suggesting Zelensky is somehow illegitimate when there is no parallel demand of Putin, a complete and total dictator, and really is left without real security guarantees if you are carefully reading those 28 points. It was a non-starter, but of course, given Trump's love of flattery and his absence of an internal dialectic, the way they've chosen to handle it is to speak less clearly than I just did, and to pretend like it's a reasonable basis and to be very polite in their rejection of it. But reject it they have, as did really Zelensky, again, despite great politeness and measured phrasing. And now we see something of a correction with the U.S., agreeing to talk to Ukraine. So no longer going over the heads of Ukraine and the Europeans and now talking to them. Is it possible that a plan that Ukraine can agree to would be agreed to by Putin as well? Maybe, but I don't know anyone who thinks it likely. So I think what we're looking at potentially is a continuation of the war. And if America walks away from it, and decides to no longer give Ukraine intelligence and to no longer even be willing to sell weaponry to NATO that is earmarked for Ukraine, that would be a problem, but it may not be fatal because the Europeans in all these areas are rapidly trying to close the gap to make America less indispensable. And that attaches to a bigger issue, which is the unraveling of the transatlantic alliance that has brought peace and prosperity to much of the globe. It's a real tragedy, and that is a function of Trump's disdain for everything that preceded him, including not only multilateral institutions that furthered global governance and responsibility, but also, of course, much of the existing establishment in the United States.
All right, thanks. That was a very detailed response from you, Dan Perry, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. But I also request you to stay on. We want to now tell you, viewers, that the United States has directed its diplomats to lobby foreign governments against policies that support mass migration. This instruction was issued through a State Department cable sent last week to dozens of U.S. embassies across Europe, Canada, and Australia. The cable reportedly states that the administration views crime and human rights abuses linked to large migrant populations and individuals of migration background as a significant concern for many countries. It further says that these issues have the potential to affect public safety and social cohesion across the West. Now, under the new directive, U.S. missions have been told to report back to Washington on incidents of crime and rights violations linked to migrants and to analyze how host governments are responding. They have also been asked to press these governments to reform migration policies and scale back programs that enable mass migration. This latest move comes as part of a broader anti-immigration agenda that has been central to President Donald Trump's political platform. Since taking office, he has expanded enforcement operations, deployed troops to the southern border, and has even pledged to deport large numbers of immigrants living in the United States without legal status. Dan, I would request you to join back on this development. Now, of course, Trump is standing true to his Make America Great Again principle and policies, and in fact also sticking to what he had promised. What kind of response should we expect from the countries that have received the cable?
Well, they have understood that Trump works well with flattery and acquiescence, verbal acquiescence at least, if not in action indeed. I think they're going to politely tell him to mind his own business while appearing to, not be too strident about it. Of course, this is a cable to U.S. Representations around the world to report on how countries are handling migration and to basically amplify any cases they find of migrants committing crimes and making trouble for these countries, to build the narrative that migration is bad. Look, it is very ironic that this attempt to quash migration internationally is being carried out by the U.S., a country almost entirely built on migration, a country that speaks English, and a little bit Spanish because of migration. It's almost comically hypocritical and absurd. On the other hand, Trump's crackdown on illegal migration coming from the South is one of his few policies in the U.S. that's popular, I think. Maybe not the brutality of ICE and some of the more outrageous aspects of it, but the idea that one should police one's border and that a Western country has no particular obligation to let in the rest of the world is indeed popular. This is a case where I think all sides are being a little bit economical with the truth, shall we say. The anti-migration forces around the world exaggerate the degree to which migrants commit crimes and underestimate the degree to which they help the economy. In many cases, the reason Europe originally had massive migration after World War II is because of labor shortages in Germany and other places. But on the other hand, the so-called progressive forces around the world that seem to be acting as if any attempt to limit the inflow of migrants from the developing world is necessarily racism, that's a lot of nonsense also. I mean, it is quite possible that in many countries, people want to maintain their culture and are willing to pay a price, an economic price, for keeping out migrants in significant numbers, in particular in Europe, where we're really, to a great degree, talking about Muslim migration. And a lot of these communities are illiberal by nature, and Europe wants to maintain its liberal society, and it's confronted with with a rather amusing paradox. Can you be liberal with illiberalism? Is it liberal to demand that people coming in with extremely conservative religious views that are in some ways antithetical to European views convert or assimilate? That doesn't sound so liberal. No one really knows what to do about all this. But without a doubt, this American cable so brazenly interfering in other countries' business essentially is another case of a dog whistle towards Trump's nativist base, just to let them know that he continues to be opposed to immigration and in general continues to be loyal to this nativist, inward-looking, hyper-conservative worldview.
All right, I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, Dan, for joining us here at NewsX World. And viewers, let's now move on to some news from Mexico, where Mexican authorities are investigating the president of the Miss Universe organization over alleged drug and arms trafficking, as well as fuel theft. The Attorney General's office says 13 arrest warrants have been issued as part of the case, but has not named any suspects. Local media report that one of the warrants targets Miss Universe president Raul Rocha, who owns half of the organization. Officials refer to him only as Raul R, following Mexican legal practice, and say details about his status will be released later. Neither Rocha nor organization has responded to requests for comment. Now, the probe, which dates back to 2024, emerges just days after Mexican contestant Fatima Bosch won the Miss Universe title in Thailand. Earlier in the competition, she led a walkout following a dispute with the pageant director and later received support from the president, Claudia Sheinbaum. Rocha acquired his 50% stake in Miss Universe in 2024 through Legacy Holding Group USA. And that's a wrap on America 360, but do keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.